This is From Now On. I'm Lisa Phillips. Just a heads up, this episode contains discussions of online predatory grooming, sexual assault, human trafficking, and stalking. Some might find it upsetting. We encourage you to take care of yourself. Welcome to From Now On. In today's episode, we are tackling this critical issue: how predators use dating apps to target and manipulate women. These platforms, designed to help people find love and connection, can also serve as a breeding ground for individuals with harmful intentions. In 2023, over 30 million Americans turned to dating apps in search of companionship, romance, or even casual encounters. While these platforms offer incredible opportunities to connect, their anonymity and widespread accessibility have also made them a tool for predators. These individuals exploit vulnerabilities, creating a false sense of security through charm, manipulation, and calculated deception. Predators often present themselves as caring, supportive, generous, but their intentions are far darker. They use tactics like love bombing, false promises, or exaggerated interest to gain trust and establish control. For many, these manipulations lead to dangerous situations, ranging from emotional harm to sexual exploitation. This episode is about more than raising awareness. It's about equipping you with the knowledge to protect yourself. Here are some essential tips and red flags to keep in mind. Love bombing. If someone showers you with excessive affection, grandiose compliments, and premature declarations of love, it's a warning sign. Predators use this tactic to build false intimacy and lower your guard. Requests for explicit photos. Be cautious if someone asks for intimate images. This often is a precursor to coercion or blackmail, a practice known as sextortion. Grandiose promises. Offers of financial support, lavish gifts, or career opportunities may sound appealing, but can be a tool to manipulate and control. Question why these offers are being made and what expectations are tied to them. Evasive details. Be wary of anyone who avoids answering basic questions about their life or is overly secretive. Transparency is a cornerstone of trust. To protect yourself while using dating apps, here are 3 essential safety tips. Background checks. Take time to verify someone's identity through their LinkedIn, social media, or other online profiles. Look for inconsistencies in their story or behavior. Second, meet in public. Always arrange first meetings in public places where you can maintain control over your environment. Avoid private or isolated locations, and especially never go to their home. Stay connected. Share your plans with trusted friends or family members. Let them know where you're going, who you're meeting, and when you plan to return. Dating apps have revolutionized the way we find love, but they require caution and discernment. Your safety is paramount, and being informed about the risk can help you enjoy the process without falling victim to harmful individuals. Stay tuned as we uncover more about the dark side of dating apps and provide you with the tools to stay in control of your own online dating journey. Knowledge is power. Let's use it to protect ourselves. Today's guest is an artist, animator, and has spent 15 years in the IT tech space. She's also a survivor of deeply traumatic events, which have forever transformed the course of her life. Jane Doe is passionate to educate others on the intersection of tech and exploitation through her own experiences. She is actively embracing the pain of rebuilding and healing to explore advocacy opportunities to create dating app safety PSAs, educate others on the complexities of sexual assault and human trafficking to help end exploitation, specifically as it relates to power imbalances and predatory playbooks. I am grateful today to welcome Jane Doe to From Now On. Welcome, Jane.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm really grateful that you're here today,
Yeah.
sharing your story.
Thank you. I'm appreciative.
So you and I connected over social media. Can you let me know what was the reason why you reached out initially to me?
Yeah. So over the course of the last 2 years, I've just been in a place of trying to educate myself after
Mhm.
surviving some pretty horrific things. And one of the ways that I educate myself is staying in tune with the news and sex
Mhm.
trafficking and kind of all of those things, just to get a pulse for what's
Mhm.
out there. And I came across one of your interviews,
Mhm.
and it was, I had so much respect for your story and reading that. But I think there was a flip side in that. Like, I was able to see myself in that
Mhm.
and have a level of validation that over the last 2 years, I've been searching for this
Mhm.
opportunity to, step away from the shame and no
Mhm.
longer be silent. But I didn't
Mhm.
really know the how, or I didn't really have a person in the world to say, oh, look, if they can do it, like that's, something that perhaps I could do as well. So that actually gave me the courage to reach out to you, and thank you for, putting your story out there, because it gave me the motivation and the hope to,
Mhm.
try to take that next step as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing to hear that. That's the
Hmm.
whole reason why I did it.
Thank
Speaking
you.
out was to
Hmm.
encourage others like
Hmm.
yourself to come forward.
Hmm.
We do deal with a lot of shame about our stories, but we don't have to,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
So it's important to me that our audience gets to know you a little bit. Could
Yeah.
you tell me a little bit more about who you are, your hobbies, what your
Yeah.
passions are?
Yeah. I appreciate that. I think oftentimes it gets lost when you're
Mm-hmm.
healing, that becomes almost your whole identity, or the
Mm-hmm.
concept of rebuilding. So going back to my roots through this, I have to say that art saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
Before my career in IT, I've been in IT for about 15 years. Super proud of that. But before IT, I went to fine art school.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was just kind of broken and shattered and I didn't know what to do with all of the trauma, after the fact, I returned to my art and I started making stained glass. And that was
Mm-hmm.
just a very healing component. So,
You made the
yeah,
piece that you gave
yeah,
me? Oh, I
yeah,
didn't know
yeah,
that. Oh, I
yeah.
love that. Wow, you're very talented.
Thank you.
You joined a dating app that was geared towards working professionals. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I had been in a marriage for quite a few years. And the summer before I joined, I decided that I was going to file for divorce. And I was going through therapy, just
Mm-hmm.
being very proactive and wanting to be mindful and thoughtful of that next chapter of my life. And being in IT, I tend to appreciate the passion and
Mm-hmm.
enthusiasm that other people have, whether it's IT or business or other careers. And so I was hoping to, in this next phase, find a like-minded professional that,
Mm-hmm.
I could find love with.
Yeah.
And also a safety aspect too.
Mm-hmm.
Being brand new into dating, it was overwhelming to think of all these different apps and
Mm-hmm.
possibilities. And so I did a lot of research, and I came
Mm-hmm.
across an app that was geared towards working professionals.
Mm-hmm.
It was supposed to be hand vetted. So I
Mm-hmm.
felt like there was a layer of safety. It had a
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn verification.
Oh, wow.
And so, on the surface, I thought,
Right.
okay, those are all green flags,
Yeah,
all
because you
healthy
can check out
things.
the person, go
Yeah.
on LinkedIn and
Yeah.
see.
And it wasn't the
Mm-hmm.
traditional, endless swiping. It was like a
Right.
curated number of matches that you get every day. And so
I like that.
externally, it seemed, like a really, great option for me
Mm-hmm.
to take that next chapter.
So you initially connected with a man in the sports industry.
Hmm.
What was the beginning of your relationship like?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't a relationship.
No.
It was more of what ended up being 48 hours of horror, to be candid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was matched again through this kind of curated experience. So I had
Mm-hmm.
this sense of safety already
Mm-hmm.
as a baseline. And then a lot of the people that are on the app have, prestigious or
Yeah.
careers
Mm-hmm.
that I think in retrospect, it's dangerous to assume because someone has a certain title, because they're accomplished, because they work in this
Mm-hmm.
field, that automatically equates to safety.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've learned a lot since then, but I think I had a very trusting, naive sense of the world at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so this individual came on very strong. And keep in perspective, I'm coming out of like a bad marriage and
Mm-hmm.
I'm searching for love. I had
Mm-hmm.
no intimacy or love. And so someone paying attention to me and what I now know to be love bombing and a lot of red flags at the time I interpreted to be, oh, this person is interested and they like me. But in
Oh, sure.
reality,
Yeah.
You could see the call logs. It was just back to back to back calls, back to back texts.
So a lot of attention from the start.
And then it started to progress into, just delete all your apps now. You're mine. You can never get away. Like
Wow,
it
that's pretty bold.
bordered on, what would be predatory. But again, at the time, I didn't really necessarily think
Yeah,
that
you
like
wouldn't think so. Why?
predatory people just, existed in the world to that degree. And I felt like that was something that you watch on TV and not something that you would experience yourself. Yeah. So that was kind of the prelude to actually meeting. It went very quickly.
So this relationship only lasted, you said 48 hours? No.
Yeah, there was no relationship.
Right.
Basically, we matched. He love bombed me. He started to be very predatory. I just didn't see the flags at the time. He insisted I call him daddy, which was a very like red flag as far as if you look at it from like a trafficking lens, right? Like I would categorize him as more of like a kind of a guerrilla pimp of sorts, like really strong, really aggressive, intense. And yeah, so at the time I was working in IT. I was working for a global company, and I was living about 4 states away from him.
Okay.
But I was driving into a state for work that was kind of adjacent to his state.
Okay.
And so while I'm there and just kind of doing my thing, I'm getting all of these phone calls and texts, and it's a little overwhelming, but at the same time, my vulnerability is love. And so as I'm getting ready to go back home and drive back to the state that I was in, living in, he's like, just come down to my state. And I remember pushing back, like, no, like that's the opposite direction. And he kept pushing and kept pushing. And he said, well, I'll get you a hotel room. And I interpreted that to be like, hey, you're going to drive across states and, spend time with him, meet him,
and go to the
have
hotel
dinner.
room.
Like that was a sign of a gentleman, kind. In retrospect, he was luring me over state lines.
Safe. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so finally, I just kind of gave in. It was like exhausting, and I didn't realize that in the moment. And so I got a ride share, went 2 hours, again, over state lines. It's just wild to think in retrospect that he had this nefarious kind of intention. And my view of it was very naive that I'm going into this to meet someone, and start this new chapter of my life and explore. And so I can remember before I got to the first meeting place, I think it's really important now, especially I try to be cognizant of it, but that gut instinct, I think too often we ignore that. But my gut instinct and just, I guess the energy that I had, the rideshare driver actually turned around and said, are you okay? Like, do you want to do this? Do you want me to go back? And I was like, I said, how about I pay you a little bit extra and you wait for me? And he's like, okay. So whatever that was, clearly I shouldn't have discounted that.
Yeah, because you've crossed state lines. You don't know this man yet.
Yeah. And so I meet at a little pub and I go in and, he looks like his picture. And again, I have this mindset that this person's this accomplished individual,
right?
And,
of course,
has a status. Like he wouldn't be a predator because all of that, he wouldn't risk that.
Yeah, that's normal to think that way.
Yeah. And so within the first few minutes of meeting, he actually made 2 roofie jokes.
Really?
Yeah. And again, like coming out of a very just kind of blind marriage where like I'm not paying attention to dating and the world and what's going on from that perspective, I kind of just wrote it off as like, oh, like he has a weird sense of humor. Yeah,
kind of creepy, but okay.
Yeah,
let's see more.
Yeah, and I didn't at that point in time understand what epidemic roofies were and how people use that. So that was a piece of my own learning that came from that. So after that, we went to dinner, and there were a few very predatory things that happened. And there were a few things that continued to elevate the status. We went into a really nice restaurant and he had this kind of like mayor of the city energy, people are like, hey, and it
charming.
It kind of just reinforced that like, oh, he's this
somebody
important
special,
person.
important.
Yeah. Okay. And so through the course of the night, he starts to tell me how a good friend of his is the CEO of a
Mhm.
major company, like
Okay.
household company.
Mhm.
And he starts to tell me how all of his friends are in the sports industry. And
Mhm.
I'm not a sports person, but
Right.
I knew the names enough because of,
Yeah.
who
That
they
was name
were.
dropping.
Yeah, name dropping.
Mhm.
He started to talk about kind of circles that he ran in that sound like organized crime. Like
Mhm.
it was just, it was building the status, but it was also building up this sense of like, this guy's kind of scary. And now I've
Mhm.
clearly in a different state.
Right.
I don't know.
Oh, so you started getting that gut feeling at
Yeah,
dinner. Okay.
yeah. But he had isolated me, and I think that's a
Mhm.
important part to consider in retrospect.
Oh yeah, you were
Yeah,
isolated and you had a hotel that night.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so from there, he suggested we go back to the hotel bar. And again, I'm thinking naively
gosh.
that this is like,
The hotel bar where your room
yeah,
is.
yeah. And so that was the first time at the hotel bar. We were standing at the end where the servers would make drinks. And I believe, even though this time wasn't caught on surveillance, like the following
Mhm.
incident, I believe he roofied me there. Because shortly after what felt like him dropping something in my drink, he started getting really antsy and looking at his watch.
Mhm.
And he's like, oh, like, let me show you where your room is. And again, I have this
boy.
mindset that, okay, it's a long night. And now today, with a lot of therapy and life experience, on the flip side of this, I would be able to see those signs. But
Yeah, but it could have been just a
historically,
regular
yeah,
guy could have just
yeah,
taken you to your room and that could have been it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you're not thinking that way.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so we get to the room, he opens the door, and I just kind of froze in a state of shock because this person supposedly lived very close nearby, had a home.
Mhm.
But as I walked in, it looked as if like someone had just been kind of like squatting in the hotel room. Like stuff was just strewn all over the
Really?
place. Like his stuff was everywhere.
It was his hotel room.
I guess,
Mhm.
like it was such a confusing dynamic because
Right. That
again,
is
I thought,
confusing. That's
yeah,
like tricking you.
yeah. And so I get in and I'm fully clothed, right? And I'm still kind of like I'm weirded out. Now I clearly would just run and bail,
Right.
but I was so shocked that I just kind of froze in that moment.
Were you feeling the effects of the roofie yet?
Yeah, I was just kind of like in a weird,
Yeah.
confused
Okay.
state. I was still mobile at that time, but so he starts to dig in a gym bag and he tells me to lay on the bed.
Oh my gosh.
So I lay on the bed fully clothed. He lays down next to me and he brings over a book that he had just written that was co-authored, or the foreword was written by this Fortune
Right.
CEO,
Mhm.
right? So like everything that he's saying is like validated.
Okay.
And he tells me to lay my head on his left shoulder and he wants to read me his book. Yeah. And so
Okay. So he just wants to brag about his stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't interpret that as predatory, even though this wasn't clearly tracking the way that it was
Yeah.
supposed to.
It's almost kind of creepy because he said to call him daddy. So it's like,
Yeah.
almost like your little girl, lay on my
Yeah.
shoulder. Let me read you
Yeah.
a bedtime story.
Yeah. And so at that point, I don't think that he even got through one page. I remember him starting to read it and it was just like the lights went completely black, like
Mhm.
done. It wasn't as if he had read a chapter and I'm like, oh, I'm
No.
tired. And that, I fell asleep, just instantaneous. And then I woke up hours later. It was around 1 to 3 in the morning.
Wait a minute. The lights went black, meaning you blacked out.
Yeah. Like
Oh,
done,
wow.
done. Like not even an opportunity to say like,
Oh, that makes sense. He had you lay down because it was about to kick in.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, again, like, I know it's hard to, unless someone's been through it, to
Mhm.
say like, how could that happen or how does that happen? But
Mhm.
that's how it happens,
Mhm.
like,
Yeah, that's how it happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I woke up hours later and he was inside of me.
Mhm.
I'm completely naked.
Mhm.
And I was in shock. Like
Mhm.
my last memory is having all my clothes on.
Mhm.
And so he rolled over to the side of the
Mhm.
bed by the door, which was, the whole situation was just
Mhm.
very shocking. And so I reached over and gently touched his shoulder
Uh-huh.
out of just like just complete shock of
Yeah.
like what just
Like, what do I do?
what
And,
just
yeah.
happened. And keep in mind, he's, twice my size,
Mhm.
so much tall. Like he's a
Right.
very big individual. So just like all the dynamics at play were like very scary. And as I touched him, that angered him.
Mhm.
And he grabbed me and threw me across the bed.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember landing and just seeing the red numbers on the clock. And I just stared at the clock and thought, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm screwed. Like,
Yeah, that is scary.
this guy knows all of these people, whether it's organized crime or, you know, shady business people, whatever that is.
Yeah, but
like,
you're also in another state.
Yeah.
Right? Roofied and don't know what, can't trust this man now. Like,
Yeah.
how are you going to get out of there?
Yeah. I'm over like 7+ hours from my home. Right. And I literally laid there and thought, he's friends with this famous CEO. Like, I can't go to the cops. And the particular state that I was in has kind of a reputation for being kind of an organized crime history area. And so I thought, well, if this guy's on the book, then maybe the other things he's saying.
Yeah.
Like, so to me, it wasn't, I know a lot of people will say, like, why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you go to the cops? But in that moment, you have to realize that you're kind of hostage negotiating. You're kind of surviving in that moment.
Sure. You just want to get out of there.
Yeah. Like it's, I think it's kind of wishful thinking to believe that you would just have like an instantaneous plan and you know how to handle that.
No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's equipped just innately to be able to handle that. And so I waited for him to fall asleep. And I thought, okay, I'll wait till it gets a little bit lighter out and I'll try to find my clothes. And the hotel curtains were cracked just enough that I could start to see it getting lighter. And so as I reached for my clothes, it would wake him up. And that's where the next phase of horror began. So he was angered that I was trying to find my clothes and clearly trying to leave. And so he would pull me back onto the bed and he choked me. I have a thyroid nodule that was a cancer scare at one point. So like, that's not something that I would ever consent to. Right. And so he choked me and he shoved my head on himself. And like, I can remember the smell. Like, people oftentimes will talk about the incident, but I feel like the details are almost as traumatizing or
you remember
specific.
The sense.
Yeah. And so this happened multiple times. And every time he would fall back asleep, I tried to get the rest of my clothes. And I found everything but my underwear. And I had a meeting the next day and that morning. And he said, no, come home with me. I was like, no, like my laptop, my stuff is in this, again, clearly like I'm a state away from all my things.
Right.
And so I was like, no, you know, I have to go. And he's like, no, I have a laptop. Come home with me. And in my mind, I'm like, if this happened in a somewhat public place, a hotel, like, you know, going to a second location sounds even more terrifying. And so I just basically was hostage negotiating with him. Like, the door's there, but he's there. He clearly wants me to do one thing. And I finally said, hey, like it was accurate. I have a meeting with my global executives. And if I don't show up to that, people are going to be concerned. And so he backed off and I was able to leave with everything but my underwear.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is pretty horrific.
And
I'm sorry you went through that.
Yeah. It continued on again over state lines again into the next state. He lured me back into, at that point, I didn't know how I was going to get away from him. And I was thinking back on all the early things that he said when he love bombed me, of like, you'll never get away, you're mine, delete all your apps. Like,
which is so strange to say to someone you haven't even met yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just reinforcing.
So no wonder those red flags were like shooting off.
Yeah. And you don't want to believe that someone like legitimately could be predatory, but like,
well, that, and also someone who's more like a public figure or,
why would they
or
risk
his status? You usually think they would never be like that.
Yeah. Why would they risk their reputation?
But they do.
And I could go on to the next day, but it's kind of the second day of.
So still another day. Okay. Yes, please tell me what happened.
The next day, again, I go back to where I was working remotely, still not my home state, but closer.
Oh, the next state over.
Yeah. And so I was in a state of shock and denial. Like, I remember trying to log into that meeting that kind of helped me get away. And I was just so numb and so like, the meeting was happening, but I was just trying to process everything. And he all of a sudden starts texted me like, oh, I have this thing in that state. I'm going to go film a podcast. I'm going to go do this. Oh, by the way, I have your underwear. I can't believe you. Like he tried to shame me. Like I was an
Right.
idiot and I left him.
Yeah,
And how
sure.
could I be so dumb? And he's saving the day and he's going to like bring him back to me. And from my perspective at the time, like I felt like he had a power over me. Like there was this imbalance. So I was just trying to buy time of like, you know, what do I do? I was scared to say no to him at that point. And it's interesting because out of all of the assault, the choking, you know, all of the things, the rape that next morning, the thing that angered me the most or that I could connect with was like, he stole my underwear.
Yeah.
Like that's such a violation, you know, which clearly all of it is horrific, but that was the one thing that I could connect with.
Yeah, to have some control over you.
Yeah. And so he had offered to bring my underwear to the hotel lobby bar area and give them back to me. Like he was saving the day. And, you know,
that must have been like a huge turn on for him.
Yeah. Like I didn't have the capacity to see, I didn't understand that people would do something that like a classic sign of serial predators or like trophy collecting.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like that was
It's
clearly
a little
that
sexy game.
Yeah. And
another way just to be in your presence again.
Yeah. And to control me and to get me to do what he wants. And so I meet him and we're in a really nice restaurant lobby area. And he takes my underwear out of his jeans and he smells them just with like a classy restaurant. I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm stuck with this guy. Like, this is, how do I get away? Like all the things it's just running.
He's so creepy.
Running through my mind. And so he starts telling me about his evening and he starts telling me really creepy things. Like he has a rope kit in his car. And again, I took it from the perspective of the roofie joke the night before. You know, is that a joke? Is that real?
But he's trying to intimidate you and scare you. So that's why you're like frozen and can't leave.
Yeah, I was. It was just like a survival instinct of like buy time, you know, do whatever I could to not anger him. He clearly threw me across the bed and raped me willingly, you know, the next day. So what else is he capable of? And so then at the restaurant lobby bar, he's like, oh, I want to get a drink. When we sat at the bar, he started, this was another interesting flag. He was getting annoyed that I hadn't gone to the restroom. He's like, don't you have to go to the restroom? Don't you have to go to the restroom? I'm like,
so he can roofie you again?
No, I'm fine. And it was like angering him. You could like, it was a palatable feeling that like he needed me to go to the restroom. And again, I could tell something was off with that, but I didn't know what to do. You know, like who do you tell?
Did you think why he was asking that?
No.
Or making you do that?
I was just so overwhelmed with like going through the steps of my, you know, what do I do? I didn't really have a
you're traumatized at that point. Yeah.
And so it's actually there where he did roofie me. It was caught in surveillance later.
Really?
Yeah.
When you went back to look at the cameras?
So later after, I can fast forward, but after all of the things I'll share happened, I finally had the courage to go to the police and they pulled the surveillance and it was him roofing me.
So wait a second. So you got up to go to the bathroom finally after...
No, what happened was I didn't think that I didn't make the roofie connection with the bathroom, but I didn't like the sun. Like I thought, okay, I should sit here. If he wants me to leave, like I probably better just here. And these two women came in that were taking kind of Instagram photos,
right?
Just kind of like a real obvious moment.
Yeah.
And he kept saying, look over there, look over there. And it, you know, it was kind of out of place.
Can't be more obvious about it.
Yeah.
Okay, but at the time you didn't think he was trying to roofie you.
No,
again.
Like I didn't think that existed in the world. Like naively, it's pure ignorance on my part.
So you didn't even know he didn't roofie you from the night before.
Yeah, like I felt like he might have put something in my drink, but the concept of like people just intentionally roofing
for sure,
people or being predatory. And so I looked and I believe that's where the surveillance caught him doing it. And then he got a to-go cup of more alcohol from the bar and suggested we go upstairs. And so at this point, whether it's from what they caught on surveillance or just kind of this sense of like, I'm stuck with this guy. Like, you know, what am I supposed to do? He's twice my size and violent. And so
he also knows the time the roofie's going to kick in.
Yeah. Yeah, clearly like the agitation
Yeah.
and the watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I share all those details just hopefully, if there's someone like
Yeah.
myself that had
Mm-hmm.
zero life experience to know that those should be flags.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'd hope that like my own experience could help shed some light on that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I went to the hotel room, again, fully clothed.
Mm-hmm.
It was a suite. So there was a bed, bedroom on one side. We were in the kind of living room side.
Right, and this is your hotel room now. Mm-hmm.
My hotel room. He sits on the couch and I'm fully clothed. And this is where I believe the roofie started to kick on. He told me to take my belt off, which there wasn't like any type of like anything happening. It was just kind of like a command or an order. And I had a very simple kind of just fashion, belt that wasn't intricate. And I remember I started getting very confused and I was like, why is my belt so hard to take off? And I was kind of trying to mouth that to him. And I could feel my arms get very like heavy and weird. And I could barely just coordinate my hands to make a belt work, like the simplicity of something like that being so difficult. And I remember the sense in that moment, it wasn't a concern or, what's going on. It was the most just like deep enjoyment. Like he was laughing, he was smirking. He thought it was funny that I was about to, and seconds after that, it was like curtains had been shut, just completely shut. There's no fade, no anything to it. And so then I woke up the next morning. At that point, my last memory is clothed, minus him trying to tell me to take my belt off. And he's not there. So he crossed state lines again. I'm there alone. I wake up just covered in bruises. I'm bleeding. I'm past the point of having periods. So it was like, oh God.
Right.
Like the bruise marks look like ligature marks.
Wow.
And it was such a surreal feeling to just pull back the covers and see my body like this.
Oh my God, that's scary.
And
he was gone.
He's gone, which you would think that if this was, say, a harmless date or he was interested in a gentleman, there's a very nice hotel. Like, why would you not stay the evening with someone if you did nothing bad?
Right, of course.
Why would you flee
Mm-hmm.
hours away back to your home across state lines to do so?
Well, he had really dark intentions that night.
Yeah. Like, what would that have been to wake up with me bleeding? Like, what is that?
And did he cut you?
I had an internal cut. That they found during the rape exam. But
so what happened next? So that's when you went to the police.
Yeah. So I debated this concept of like, who does this guy know and the status?
Well, that's why he told you all that.
So he set the foundation for that. But I also knew that if I was going to ever do anything, like ever, this was my window. Like I needed to go to the ER. Like if, maybe I didn't have the intentions to go to the police, but I felt like I should get medical help. And it took me a few hours to get up the courage to do that. And in the time leading up to that, as I'm kind of just like scouring my body, like, oh my gosh, just trying to take like inventory of what my body looked like. I went into the bathroom and I had this really unusual bruise on my shoulder blade, just a huge bruise. Had a bruise on my shin, like places that, if people think of like, oh, rape and sex, and it's so like such a blurry line, like people have very kind of outsider views or, ignorant views to that. But those things clearly had nothing to do with sex. They had to do
you also had no memory of how you got them.
Yeah.
Which is even 10 times scarier.
Very much so. And so I just kind of like took note of that, but I had no explanation for that. And so he ended up that morning before I went to the ER, he sent me what looked like a revenge porn pic. It was a woman that looked very similar to myself. A man didn't have, head was cropped off, had a similar watch, similar build to his, that was in this very bizarre, I don't know what the right word would be, but like bondage rope neck situation. He
Right.
had her on the edge of the bed, like where it looked like someone probably could have gotten killed or hurt. But the thing that stuck out the most to me was this person, the man, had all of his weight on this woman's left shoulder. And that's exactly where I had this really just atrocious bruise on my body. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, like I need to go. Like I have to go now.
Yeah, this is getting really scary.
Yeah, yeah. And
so wait a second. So did you think that was you, that he took the picture?
yeah, so
or did you think it was him had the picture and he was acting it out?
At the time, I thought it was me. The clarity, like it was kind of pixelated, kind of fuzzy. It almost looked like if someone was taking video
And
they
just took a
like
screenshot.
a screenshot. That's what it looked like. And so my mind kind of was like,
So it's almost like it's showing it to you, like, oh, this is what happened.
yeah. And this specificity of where the bruise was.
Yeah,
you know,
had
like,
the same bruise on you.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah. And so I left to get an Uber. And on the way out, I saw the to-go cup. And I was angered, like,
Yeah.
because before the belt situation, he had me drink out of that. And so whether there was more drugs there or at the bar, like a combination, I don't know. But I went to throw it out and I thought, no, I should save this in case I do go to the cops. And I tucked it in a drawer. And I went to the ER, and there's nothing that prepares you for that. Like I have so much like space in my heart now for anyone that's had to go through that experience.
Through a rape kit.
Yeah. I remember just the sheer fear of walking into, you know, the little triage, like, hey, what's your name and what do you need? And I'm just blurting out, you know, like this just happened. And they brought me into a triage room and it was 2 women and there was a man. And it was just such a like intense, clearly this person's a nurse and they're doing their job, but I was so traumatized from what had happened that I just started like shaking and crying when I saw a man, and they luckily had enough self-awareness to say like, hey, can you leave the room? And so yeah, the SANE exam was 7 to 8 hours. Like you watch TV and you think like, oh, like, you know, that's part of an episode and it's just a blip. Like that was a very intense moment. You're in a hospital gown covered with bruises. You have strangers. I luckily had a very wonderful SANE nurse. So a very specific nurse has to kind of go through that. And one of the things that she did, like if you watch, you know, a Dateline or something like that, there's the chalk outline of bodies, right? So she had to document and put X's on the chalk outline where all my bruises were.
Wow.
And she showed it to me. And that moment was so powerful because I was so numb and so scared and so like just overwhelmed, unable to process what happened, but somehow seeing this little kind of paper outline and realizing, oh my gosh, that's me. And so she eventually gained my trust. And I asked her, hey, can I show you a graphic picture? And she's like, sure. And I showed her she was aware from doing that, the bruise in my back. And she looked at it and she's like, you need to show the police that. Like it was very, you know, intense. Like you could just kind of read the room with her energy on that. And so finally I said, okay, like I'll talk to the police. And she called 2 detectives down.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
It was scary because again, I had this like overall intimidation factor of men. Like it kind of just shattered my outlook of like, who do you trust and how does this work? And again, like I'm in a hospital gown. It's so vulnerable to just have 2 strange men in the room. And they took my statement. And I remember they needed his cell phone or his information. And I remember just like freaking out, like, no, he's going to kill me. Like, he's going to hurt me. Like, no, like you can't go knock on his door and tell him that I'm filing a report. And they said,
he probably would have never have thought that you were going to go to the police. Right.
Yeah. And so the detective was very kind and he said, listen, you don't have to file the report now, but we'll take all of this. And when you're ready, or if you're ready, you can reach out.
Mm-hmm.
They, after this whole ordeal, again, like documenting internal cuts and
Mm-hmm.
just strange people in and out, just like, you know, this was a normal day for them, but this was one of the worst days of my life, surrounded by strangers and no one to hug or cry on, right? And so they, the two detectives stuck around. They helped me move hotels. And I ended up driving back again to my home. So I'm like 5 hours away. And I stop at a rest stop. And again, I couldn't connect with everything, like the rape, the violence was, the bruises were clearly there.
Yeah, you're in shock.
But as I was walking to the rest stop, my shin was just like on fire. Like I could barely like walk without pain. And I had this huge knot on my shin that looked as if someone had kicked me.
Oh my gosh.
A friend of mine had played soccer and he's like, that looks like someone's, you know, kicked, like it's that. And again, that was the only thing that I could connect with. It's like, that's violence. Like what he did to me was violent and I need to do the right thing. And again, I say that with like the lens of, I don't think that there's any one particular way to handle an assault. It's a very, very personal decision. But for me, that was enough to say like, whatever this process is going to be like, I'm fully committed because that's not something that you should do to someone else. And
no, absolutely not. I'm so glad that you're alive, that you survived.
Thank you.
It wasn't easy for you. Like, so you're processing it afterwards, like the pain, like maybe the drugs wear off and you start to really feel the bruises and feel the pain.
Yeah.
That's probably why all of a sudden you're like, wow.
Yeah. It was so severe. I don't know if you have a cat or if you've ever been around a cat, but they do that cute little thing where they come up and kind of bonk your leg or, you know, rub past it. And it was so severe that when my cat would rub past it, it was like, it was all over with. Like just a little tiny cat, just, you know, doing a little head bump into your leg. Like,
oh my gosh.
The interesting part was like, while the assault and all the trauma happened, here I am after that fact, still living in this body.
Yeah, of course.
Still seeing it, you know, and that was a lot in itself. But
well, yeah, for the physical wounds to heal, but yeah, dealing with what's emotional after that.
Yeah,
it's the hard part.
So the PD actually pulled the surveillance. They extradited him again from another state.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, and
so you filed the report now.
So I see the shin at the rest stop, and I left the detective a message and said I want to press charges.
Good for you.
And I didn't know what was ahead, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. But
you're like, I'm beat up.
Yeah, like it was just so enraging to me to think that a human did
like,
that.
This isn't consent.
Yeah, like there's
and
nothing.
You don't even remember anything.
There's nothing.
Like he completely violated everything.
Yeah.
I don't know, like how these men think that it's okay to do something like that. I just don't understand.
I think it's a level of arrogance and entitlement.
For sure.
And then you layer on kind of the concept that like people in positions of privilege or status don't have the same consequences that an average everyday person would.
Because most of the time they do get away with it.
They do. And so in that process, they extradited him. They did a search warrant for his home. This was really...
Oh, they went that far.
Yeah. So this was all the validation that I needed.
Okay.
It ironically didn't make the news headlines to the degree that I think if a middle class man did this. But they did a search warrant of his home. They found my underwear. They found other women's underwear and like a rape rope kit.
Oh, exactly what he told you.
Gear, right? So like classic trophy collection, like check the box of what serial predators do. They collect trophies, right? Disgusting. I feel like there should have been more outrage. I remember vocalizing when I heard that directly as an update. You know, I'm like, what about the other women?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and there was no care or concern.
They stayed silent.
Care or concern. But at the same time, like up to 13 women came forward in the news and said they were ready to testify against him. And that went silent as
Wow.
well.
Yeah.
And so there's women coming forward.
13 of them.
I've connected with 2, like uncovered 2 other people that had experienced varying degrees of assault by him as well. There was an ex-girlfriend that went in the news and talked publicly about while they were in a relationship, he non-consensually roofied her, bound her, raped her. And when she, according to the news article, I've never had contact with her, but the news article interview goes into detail how she confronts him, and he admits it and says, "Oh, like I did it gently," or like I wouldn't ever harm
gently.
you. You know, something to that extent.
To your girlfriend.
Yeah, yeah, like non-consensual violence, and you're just going to gaslight a person into thinking that that's not
crazy. Like you roofie your own girlfriend.
Yeah.
Just to do whatever you want to do. And don't worry, I was gentle.
Yeah. And then the last...
Did she file a report?
Not that I'm aware of.
She just told you about it?
It was an interview. So all this stuff was coming out in the news. So to put that in perspective, while the kind of media press perspective was like, oh, she's so brave for coming forward. We're going to have a victim's advocate. She'll be supported. I had no victim's advocate. None. Like I was literally getting updates on my own case through the media, through the news. And that kind of leads me to the last like highlight of, you think of the trauma, but then you think of the secondary trauma of what you go through potentially after that. It was the day, I believe, after my birthday. So like the aftermath of all of this is leading up to my birthday. And I refreshed Twitter to try to figure out what's going on, what's the latest, because I have no line in. Like I wasn't supported in the way that there was this public, you know, perception. And on Twitter, I realized, oh my gosh, there's my rape report. I'm reading my rape report unredacted for the first time on the internet, alongside the rest of Twitter.
The police leaked it?
Yeah. So I immediately called the detective, just bawling, because again, like how much trauma can you really survive at that point? You're already like healing, you're in this body, trying to make sense of it. Your life's shattered. But then as you try to get updates on Twitter, there's the full rape report. And
does it have your name on it?
It didn't have my name, but it had the same nurse.
Yeah.
Like her
you
full
knew it was
name.
yours.
And I called him, and he said that when they extradited him, a cop in that other state had snapped a picture of it and released it to the media. And I remember having a moment where I was like, so like someone's going to do something, right?
Yeah,
but
it's
like,
so violating, but they get paid for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why they do it.
And like,
really.
Again, I think if that was no status, no circles of influence, like people should be outraged. I was outraged as well as hurt to think of like,
you have to be mortified.
Yeah. You've experienced something so personal and violent. And now the graphic details of that are just for public consumption.
Yeah. How are survivors supposed to speak out or want to speak out when your own police that you go to tell to file a report, leak it to the media? It's not the first time we've heard this.
Yeah.
Here, another guest said that they leaked her report to, I think it was TMZ.
Wow. It's just something that you can't even wrap your mind around.
Have more respect.
Yeah.
And I've heard you say that rape is the perfect crime. Yeah. Can you explain why you say that?
Yeah. I don't smile because I support it, but it's just like a sense of like, I can't believe that. Again, if I've learned anything from this experience, I've worked in IT and data. And so just in my professional world, I do a lot of research. And so I leaned into that as a part of healing. And as I was trying to unpack and understand rape and sexual assault and kind of all the layers, I realized that only 1% to 3% of rapists are convicted. And the reason that I researched that was because a lot of the chatter around me was like, well, you should be happy that he got extradited. I'm like, well, isn't that the thing that's supposed to happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you should be happy they're moving forward with pressing charges. Like, what I came to the conclusion of is because people aren't willing to be brave and try more cases, they're never going to move the needle. So it's always going to be that 1% to 3%. And it's an interesting contrast to me, because if you think of if your neighbor's car were to be broken into and they say, oh gosh, my stereo got stolen or my purse is gone, you would have like just an instant outrage or, a sense of support. Like, that's so awful. You wouldn't say like, oh, like what color was the car? Did you leave it unlocked? And you think of one crime being even more violent than the other, right? Both violating.
Yeah.
And I feel like robberies and rape are kind of like tried at the same, rates. And it just, those are things that I can't unlearn now. And it's unfortunately the way that it seems that things are set up. Like,
yeah,
it's perfect.
Well, for a long time, it has been the perfect crime, but not anymore. I think things are changing as women are finding their power and their courage and speaking out and filing those reports when it happens. I think with podcasts like this, we're getting the awareness out there and women to just know what the next steps are when you're going through something like this. And then also women also feel like, I'm in this situation and, oh, maybe at first I liked him. He was a good guy, or there's some love bombing. So a lot of times you think, oh, I put myself in this situation.
Absolutely. And
yeah, that's where all the shame comes from. But you're not supposed to get raped.
Yeah.
Any normal guy is not going to, roofie you, and say I booked a hotel room for you and then all his clothes were there, all these little red flags and things.
Yeah, there's lots of layers too. Like the confusing part to me was before this, I thought of people in positions of power or positions, titles that were supposed to help you. I got a lot of very, whether it's like internalized misogyny or just kind of rape shaming. But some of the things that I heard was, well, you let him into your hotel room. So that's consent.
Exactly.
I remember crying, like, consent is moment to moment.
Right.
Like that's not consent. Right. And another piece of like advice or feedback, this is part of why I was silent for so long, because I believed these people, right? This person's very well accomplished, a woman, right? So you want to just instinctively think that they have your best interests at heart. And I said, hey, I never pressed charges in this other state where clearly he lured me over state lines, all the things, right? And she said, well, he has daughters. Think of his daughters. And I remember saying, like,
what does that have to do with it?
His choice to have children has nothing to do with his choice to violate me. And
so don't let his daughters know what a creep he is and predator. Maybe they should know. They probably already do know.
Yeah, it's that. Like, and so if I've learned anything from this, is just that self-awareness of like, you're your own best expert. It's great to get other people's perspectives, but like, don't hold on to that so tightly just because they have a title or a position. Because,
exactly. They have their own agenda or own way of thinking.
There's win rates, right? Like people are more concerned about their win rate in their position than they are perhaps helping a victim find justice.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't always trust women in that regard. Because some of them are the accomplice. Some of them are like helping them or enabling them.
Yeah, for sure.
Well aware they're doing it, So you did all the right things. You got a rape kit. You reported him to the police. Was justice served for you?
There was no justice.
No?
No. I prepped for a grand jury. Things started to fall apart. Like I had done a tox panel with the rape kit. Acetone was found in my blood.
Acetone?
That was discounted.
Wow.
Right. Like,
where does that come from?
From what I've gathered, it's a byproduct of roofies.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, and again, the IT nerd part of me is like reached out to like data scientists and people that like do this for a living just to pick their brain of like, can you review this? What do you think? Right?
Yeah. I mean, he might have his own concoction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like P. Diddy did.
Yeah. 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 And, so things just, started to, for lack of a better word, like fall apart. And I almost got a sense because things weren't being publicized. Like, why isn't a trophy collection of underwear?
Yeah.
Where's the outrage and the curiosity? Like, where's the public call to action of like, if you've been victimized and had this, come forward? None of that happened.
Right.
And eventually he, again, I was getting all my updates through the news. So I saw that there was like bail hearings where his bail was dropped. They removed his tracking device, his ankle monitor, without ever notifying me. Right?
So he was released.
Yeah, like free to walk around. But
Okay.
I found out.
They didn't even tell you?
No.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
Yeah. And so
why would they not tell you that?
Yeah.
Your life is still in danger.
Yeah.
He could still be really upset and come after you.
Oh yeah, he was. He continued up until before he was extradited. He continued to blow up my phone. And it was so bad. I actually picked up a blocked number thinking it was someone else.
What did he say?
It was him. I don't even remember the words. I was at my friend's.
Was he like mad at you, or is he still trying to do like twisted thoughts?
And I remember I just started crying and shaking. And my friend that was there was like, oh gosh. And I called the police contact after that. And I was like,
well, I've heard a lot of times, even if you prosecute them, they still kind of have this twisted sexual thing for you. And,
Yeah. And so basically it seemed, whether, I could speculate, I don't know what the behind the scenes or the reality of it was, but it seemed, again, just this power imbalance, this status kept
There's a major power imbalance.
Yeah. I think it influenced the news cycle. And so basically there was a decision to be made. I believe it's pronounced Noel prosecute. It's not as if it's dismissed and we think that you're innocent. It's that we don't believe that we have enough now.
Yeah, enough evidence.
Right. Maybe if there was 13 of those women that came forward, they would have enough. But
so 13 women did come forward, but they didn't want to join you. And
supposedly they interviewed them and they all said he was great, which I thought was such like bizarre feedback. And I've had an investigative journalist find one woman in a week's time that he did this to. Right. So like something doesn't add up. I don't know what doesn't add up.
Scared. They're scared of speaking out. Yeah.
And so basically it was Noel prosecuted on International Women's Day. So I thought that was such a wild day to pick. Like, again, the rape kit, crossing state lines, I did all the things, right? All the check boxes were there for a predator. And that's their expertise, right? It's their decision if they move forward. But why choose to announce that on International Women's Day? Like it just felt like the same violation of seeing my rape report on Twitter for the first time.
The kick in the gut. I just want to thank Jane Doe for coming on From Now On. There's so much more we want to talk about, so we're going to pause here and continue this important conversation on next week's episode. This is From Now On. I'm Lisa Phillips. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and remember, there is strength in speaking out. And special thanks to our courageous guest, Jane Doe. Elizabeth Wyndham is our senior producer. Christopher Leon is the editor. Corey Wynn is our director of photography. And Jose Oriana is our studio producer. Our theme music is Many Worlds by Memory Theory. If you have any thoughts, questions, or stories about your own views on topics discussed on From Now On, email us at fromnowonpod@gmail.com. And please follow, rate, comment, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If today's conversation resonated with you and you are seeking more support in your own healing journey, if you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, help is available. Call 800-656-HOPE. If you or someone you know is being trafficked, contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Text 233-733. That's Be Free. PAVE is a 501c3 nonprofit creating a world free from sexual violence and building communities to support survivors. To learn more, go to shatteringthesilence.org. Speak Out, Act, Reclaim, SOAR, is dedicated to providing a safe and empowering space for survivors of sex trafficking to reclaim their stories and stand up for themselves and each other. That's www.speakoutactreclaim.org.